Well, good morning and Merry Christmas. They can't argue with us any longer. It is officially the Christmas season. Anybody excited about that? Yeah. We love Christmas. Around my house, I have battle wounds from a Christmas tree this morning. I have been wrestling with it all weekend. We love Christmas. When I was in kindergarten, Christmas of that year, we had show and tell at school following Christmas. So we got back to school in January, and the assignment was to bring your favorite Christmas gift to show the class. Now, that year, my dad, he built an enormous playhouse out in our backyard for my sister and me. And it was huge. It was like 2 stories. It had slides and swings, and it had a zip line, like the whole thing. Loved it. But obviously, I was not able to take my playhouse to school with me to show my friends. So I decided what I would do is just to take another gift that I also liked. So also that year, I received a My Buddy for Christmas. I believe we have a picture. Did anyone else receive a My Buddy for Christmas about 25 years ago? All right, now I actually heard last sermon, there were some who did but were afraid to raise their hands. So I believe that some of you guys, you may have received a My Buddy. Now, you may know where this story is going, but it did not go well for me when I decided to take my buddy to school with me. I remember walking into the class, and like I had the thing like tucked under my arm like this, and I walk into the class, and almost immediately there were a group of boys that just kind of darted to a corner of the room. And I could hear them laughing and kind of loudly whispering, "Chase got a baby doll for Christmas." 5-year-old Chase was mortified, right? Like, oh man, like I couldn't bring my playhouse and I brought my baby doll. But I'll tell you, 30-year-old Chase, I still love that doll. I remember actually going home and playing with it more. Like I love that doll. And I'm especially grateful for it now because I am the father of 2 daughters, and I am a pro at playing with baby dolls. Like I know all the tricks. I've been doing it since I was little. So it has actually served me well. Apart from that one traumatic event 25 years ago, I still love Christmas and I love everything about it. And my love for Christmas is one of the reasons that I'm so excited about next Sunday here at Essential. Who can tell me what's happening next Sunday? Oh, guys, you got to get more excited than that. It is the Essential Christmas Kickoff. It is going, yeah, there you go. It is going to be amazing next Sunday, both services. We are going to have an ugly sweater contest. Kayla and I, my wife, we went shopping on Friday morning just to buy our ugly sweater. So we have that. We're going to have gingerbread cookies. We're going to have games for the kids. We're going to have a ton of giveaways, surprises. It is going to be so much fun next Sunday. We love, as a church, having fun together. And then that is a big part of the reason why we have these big days, why we celebrate the Essential Christmas Kickoff and do all these things, because we enjoy having fun. But I'll tell you a bigger reason that we have the big days. Yes, we like to have fun, but it is more than that. We have these big days. We have the Essential Christmas Kickoff because it is part of our focused effort as a church to reach more and more of the 250,000 people who live within driving distance of this building and who do not go to church. 250,000 people within driving distance who are not involved in church. So that's why we have these big days. It is our way of blowing the expectations of what church can be. It's our way of when people come in, they realize this is not the church that they left 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's our way of making it easier for you and for me, for us, to invite our friends and neighbors and coworkers to join us. Because it's going to be a ton of fun. And of course, as every Sunday, the gospel will be preached. And so it's just a fun way. Hey, let's go to that church that's having the ugly sweater contest. So that is part of our strategy for these big days. And that is why we're so passionate about that. So if you haven't already, I want to encourage you, invite someone to join you next Sunday. be thinking and praying about who that is, or just invite everybody. Your coworkers, your neighbors, your friends. Invite them to join you next Sunday morning for the Essential Christmas Kickoff. We're going to be reading this morning from Matthew chapter 8, and you can go ahead and be looking that up in your Bibles, your phones. We're going to read it in just a moment. But as you're reading that, or as you're looking that up, I want to ask a question this morning. Do any of you, does anyone have trouble keeping focus? Yes, it sounds like a lot of yeses in the crowd. Like there is so much going on in our lives, school and work and kids and all of these things going on. Like our attention is so divided that it is really hard to keep focus. I'm right there with you. But what would happen if we chose to focus on making real differences that really matter? As believers and as a church, what would happen if we chose to make real differences that really matter? We've been in an incredible series called Room to Breathe, and we've learned what it could look like to have breathing room in many aspects of our lives. Today, I want us to look at the benefits of having a life that is focused. Specifically, I want us to see how a focused life, it will not only provide us breathing room, but it will give us purpose and relevance each day. I think that's something that we can all get behind, is to have a life that has purpose and relevance each day. In the Gospel of Matthew, it is in chapter 8, we read an astounding exchange between Jesus and two gentlemen that he calls to follow him. This is Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 22. It says, "Now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. And a scribe came up and said to him, 'Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go.' And Jesus said to him, 'Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head.' Another of the disciples said to him, 'Lord, let me go and bury my father first.' And Jesus said to him, 'Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead.'" Let's start with what I think is the most alarming part of this passage. Jesus calls on a guy to follow him, and the guy says, well, first, let me go and bury my father. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can come up with some excuses to God doing things, right? Just ask Kayla, my wife. Like, she asked me to do dishes. She asked me to take the trash out. Like, I'm going to find an excuse to, yeah, I'll do that, but just give me a few minutes, right? I know for many of us, husbands in the room, it may be, yeah, I'll do that, but first let me go to the bathroom, right? Anybody else in that book? Wives, can you attest to that? One person's in trouble. But we can make excuses. To, well, yeah, I'll do that, but let me do fill in the blank first. But what we have here is much more serious. This guy, he's not saying, well, let me go to the bathroom first, or let me, check Facebook first. He's saying, let me go and bury my father first. And then Jesus responds, catch this, "Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead." Like, when I read this, I'm thinking, whoa, like, look at Jesus coming on with a sass right here. Like, wow, like, this is a sensitive subject. And Jesus says, don't worry about it. Let the dead bury their own dead, and you come and follow me. What is going on here? Well, here are a few things that we need to know first about this passage. The burial process 2,000 years ago, we don't have it, it takes longer than it does now. We'll leave it at that. Takes longer than it does now. So now it's a pretty expedited process, right? But back then, it could have taken months, if not years. So there was a whole lot of things that had to go into it, a lot of process with the burial. It could have taken months, if not years. And in fact, some scholars say that the father may not have even been dead yet, like he may not have even died. And so what this guy is saying here is he's not saying, hey, can I take a half day off work to be at the funeral home by 2? What he's saying is, well, Jesus, following you, it sounds pretty all right, but let me get to you in a year or so once things get settled with Pops. Just let me take some time. So what Jesus is saying here is that following him, like he tells us, God, let the dead bury their own dead. What he's saying is that following me, following Jesus is urgent. It is important. And it needs to be our sole focus. It's nothing against pops. It's nothing against our parents. In fact, honor your father and your mother is one of the 10 commandments. And Jesus solidifies that commandment in the New Testament. But Jesus also says in Matthew 10:37, whoever loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. It's a strong statement right there. Whoever loves his father or his mother more than me is not worthy of me. So what's the point here? The point is, as believers, following Jesus is most important. And in order to live a life that is purposeful and relevant, we must remain focused on keeping the main thing the main thing. We must keep the main thing the main thing. For us, for those of us who follow Jesus, focusing on the main thing, and that is following Jesus, it is going to require us to say no to some things. All of us who are here this morning, we said no to something in order to say yes to being here this morning. Like at least the 9:30 service said no to sleeping in this morning. I know, I don't know about you guys, but no, we said no to sleeping in this morning. We said no to going out for brunch. We said no to staying at home and working on that chore list. And here's the thing. We said no to those things, but those things aren't necessarily bad. Like, those things sound pretty good to me. Like, I'm all for, sleeping in when I can or going out for brunch. I love it as much as the next guy, and I have things to do around the house. So these things, they aren't necessarily bad. In fact, they sound pretty good. However, we did say no to something good in order to say yes to something better, and that is worshiping together this morning. And being solely focused on Jesus, we must say no to some good things in order to say yes to the best thing. Let's look at the first part of our passage again, verses 19 and 20 of Matthew chapter 8. And a scribe came up and said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." You see what Jesus is saying here? He says, all right, well, you really want to follow me? I don't even have a place to lay my head at night. Remaining focused on Jesus and Jesus being the primary goal in our life, following him, it is going to require us to sacrifice some comfort and security. It's going to require us to say no to some good things in order to say yes to the best thing. Anyone here this morning familiar with the hokey pokey? Yeah, show of hands. All right, now everybody stand up. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do it together. But you know the gist of the hokey pokey, right? Like it's the song that we used to sing at the skating rink when we were kids, or the junior high dances. And so, you put one leg in and one leg out, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey. Following Jesus is not the hokey pokey, where we can put one leg in and then pull that leg out. No, what Jesus is calling for is he is calling for disciples who are willing to go all in for him, to follow him and focus solely on him. So again, it's not this one leg in, one leg out. No, he is calling for people who will say no to some good things in order to say yes to the best thing and to be all in following him. Now, you might be thinking the sermon could end there, and I hope not, because this one is not going to end right there. But you're thinking, all right, like we've got it. Jesus is the main thing. Amen. Amen. Unfortunately, too many sermons, they do end right there. And unfortunately, too many of us, I've been guilty of this, like we stop right there as well. We say, well, yes, Jesus, I will focus on you and I will follow you. But then we never really get any further than that. We say, oh, well, when the circumstance is right, I'll follow you. Or, oh, as soon as I get married, or as soon as this thing happens, or as soon as I get this promotion at job, or whenever these things happen, yes, I will follow you. We'll say we'll do whatever God tells us to do, but then we spend a lifetime just kind of wandering aimlessly, simply speculating about what God would have us to do. If I want to leave this room right now, what do I need to do? Like, someone shout out some steps for me. Walk, yeah. So I may take a moment just to observe my surroundings. Like, I know I don't want to fall off the stage right now. So, okay, there's a step, and there's my path. But eventually, what's going to need to happen is I'm going to need to start actually taking steps to get to the door, right? So I'm going to need to be taking steps to get out the door. Don't worry, I'm not leaving. But yeah, you're going to actually have to take steps to get there. Now, I could stand on this stage all morning and I could stare at that door, but unless I actually take one step after another, I'm not going to get there. Like, that focus isn't going to do me any good without action. It's much the same in following Jesus. Yes, we should keep our sole focus on Him, and we should pray, and we should read the Bible, and we should do all those things. Those things are required for faith, for building our faith and for strengthening it. But let's not neglect the focused action that is also required. Following Jesus is actionable. It's a journey that always has a next step. I believe one of the tragedies that we see in the church as a whole today is that we have loads of knowledge and resources, and we know we have access to solutions to many of the world's problems, but we don't take the action to solve them. We tend to suffer from paralysis by analysis. We spend so much time and energy deciding on what to do that we never really get around to doing anything at all. It's paralysis by analysis. I was a senior in high school when I began sensing a call into ministry. Now, I began to pray about this, of course, and I read every book, and I attended every conference that I could. I listened to sermons, just trying to make sure that this is what I wanted to do, what I needed to do. I did feel called, but as a 17-year-old, I knew that this was a big decision. It's a big decision at any age, and so I want to make sure that I got it right. I'll tell you when things solidified for me, when I knew, like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I was attending a conference, and on a stage like this one, there were a panel of missionaries and ministers, and the question came up. It was Q&A, and here was the question. How did you know you were called into ministry? Like, when I heard this, I was on the edge of my seat, right? Because this is the question that had been keeping me up at night. This is the question that I was trying to answer and to figure out. So okay, let me hear these answers. How do you know you were called into ministry? And they kind of passed the mic down, and a lady who was serving overseas, she was a missionary. She grabbed the mic. And again, the question, how do you know you were called into ministry? This was her response. You guys ready? She says, by reading my Bible. And I'm thinking, come on. Like, I didn't even know missionaries were allowed to be sassy, but it seemed like this lady took it to a new level. Like, really? Like, you're going to tell me because I read my Bible? Like, I'm trying to figure this thing out. But then she went on to explain. She says that there were no real signs and wonders when she made this decision to go onto the mission field, that she was not even sure that she was called to do this, but here's what she knew. She was reading her Bible, and she saw where Jesus called his disciples to go into all the nations, baptizing and making other disciples, and she said, okay, I'll do that. Like, she read in her Bible, like, Jesus tells his disciples to do this thing, and she says, well, okay, I'm a disciple of Jesus, and so that's what I'm going to do. She was solely focused on him, and then she was taking steps to follow him. She read in her Bible, and she said, okay, that's what I'll do. I will serve on missions. Hearing this missionary story 12 years ago, it helped solidify my own calling into ministry, but then it also, and possibly, is the biggest reason that I'm standing on stage here at Essential Church this morning. seeing the principles that she used, like, yes, like, God in his word said to do these things, so I'm going to do them. It really helps Kayla and I make some of the bigger decisions that we've made. 4 years ago, I was on staff at Epic Church in San Francisco. We had moved there from Mississippi to attend seminary, and then I went on staff at this church, and I was the administrative assistant to the lead pastor there. Now, also on staff at Epic Church, as you may know, was our very own Pastor Tim Milner, who was the executive pastor at this church. So I was administrative assistant, Tim was the executive pastor, and I was in my office one day that I shared with another guy who was an admin assistant. And Tim walks in and says, hey, Chase, can we have a talk? I think, yeah, sure, what's up? What you need? And Tim, he says, well, can you actually step out of the office? So at that point, I'm thinking, like, okay, like, I can step out of the office, thinking, okay, this is something, pretty serious. And so then I step out of the office, and Tim and I are standing there, and he says, no, actually, let's go outside. And he's talking like outside the building. And I knew in that moment that I was being fired. Like here I was, the admin assistant, here comes the executive pastor, hey, let's go outside of the building. And I had watched enough people get fired on TV that I thought I would at least get a chance to go back and clean out my desk. But no, not with Tim. Like, he's going to take me out on the streets of San Francisco and say that's it. So we start to leave the building, and we're going up these stairs, and Tim isn't saying much, and I can't say anything. And so we get outside, and we cross this street, and we get in this little park area. And Tim, we're standing face to face, and Tim takes a deep breath, and I can't breathe at all. And this is what he says. He says, Chase, he said, I wanted to let you know that Kristen, his wife, Kristen and I, we feel called to go back to my hometown of Huntsville, Alabama, and to start a church. And then he pauses. And then I pause. I'm like, okay, I'll pray for you. Like what is this? And then he follows that up, and he says, we've been praying about this, and we want to ask Kayla and you to go with us. I did not know what emotion to feel in that moment. Like, I was 100% certain I was getting fired, and instead I got a job offer, and I didn't know what to say except for, thank you, I'll get back to you. Like, let me talk to Kayla. I don't even know what's going on. But no, we are extremely grateful for Tim and for Kristen and for them inviting us on this journey with them. And we have been here 3 or 4 years now and have absolutely loved it. But here's a little bit of how that decision was made for Kayla and me. We knew by reading the Bible that God called his disciples, that Jesus calls his disciples to go and to baptize, to go and to make other disciples, to go and to love God and love people. Like, we knew all these things. And then we also knew, well, that sounds a lot like church planting. Now, in California, I was there a part of seminary, and so I was getting toward the end of that, and so we were looking for a next step. Like, we didn't know what was next. We really wanted a job, and so we were close to graduating, and I knew that, hey, these things that Jesus is talking about here, baptizing and making disciples, that sounds a lot like church planting, and so we said yes. And here we are, and it has been, like I said, incredible, an incredible journey. And I don't tell you that this morning to brag about how much faith we have, because there are many things that we have not gotten right. But we knew in that moment that our faith required action. That we knew that from reading the Bible and from all the things that we had seen, that we had heard from God, that we needed to take a step in our faith. And so that's what we did. This morning, there are many of us, actually all of us, if we follow Jesus, we have a next step to take. Following Jesus is actionable. If you're here this morning and you're a follower of Jesus and you are breathing, then there is a next step in your faith. It always works that way. We should always focus on Jesus, but we should never be the one to just stare at the door hoping to get out of there. We should always be taking next steps in our faith. Perhaps you're here this morning and you don't follow Jesus. We would love to talk with you more about that. Maybe that's a step that you're interested in taking. Maybe you have questions you'd like to explore that more. If you will, write that on your connection card. There's a box that you can check. Turn that in to the offering buckets here in just a few moments. We'd be happy to pray for you, to meet with you, to answer any questions you have. But for those of us who do follow Jesus, it could be any number of things this morning. Maybe it's something that we know for some time now that God has been calling us to do this thing. Maybe he has been calling us to walk across the street and to meet that neighbor that moved in that we haven't met yet. Or maybe he's been put on our heart to call that friend or that family member just to say, I love you, or to have that tough conversation with. It could be any number of things. But I do know this morning that each of us, and this is for me too, that we have a next step in our faith. So here in just a moment, we're going to pray, and the band is going to come up and play a song. And as that is playing, I want to ask you just to take a moment, just reflection, self-reflection, to pray. God, what is my next step? What are you calling me to do? If you're drawing a blank, then I have something for you. Pray about who you can invite next Sunday. That is part of making disciples. That is getting people here that can hear the gospel. Do that. Invite someone to join you next Sunday. Whatever it is for you, I encourage you to take action today. Let's focus intently on Jesus and take next steps toward him.